Alright guys, how's it going, and welcome back to another Satisfactory video. In this video, I'm going to share 20 of the tips and tricks that the game either doesn't really tell you about clearly, or doesn't tell you about at all, but are things that I use in all my playthroughs. These tips apply to any stage of the game, so hopefully they can be helpful to both new players and experienced players alike. As always, if you can, please consider subscribing and hit the bell notification to be kept up to date with our videos. And also remember to hit that like button too. Okay, let's get started. Tip 1. To save you frequently having to go into the build menu and searching for things to build, you can assign them to your hotbar. All you need to do is hover your cursor over the item in the build menu that you want to put in your hotbar and press any key between 1 and 0 and put it in there. That way you won't need to access the build menu anywhere near as much. Tip 2. You may have noticed that there's a number in a circle that's to the left of your hotbar, but you never knew what it was for. Well, that's telling you which hotbar is currently active. If you have all default key bindings, you can change the active hotbar by holding down the Alt key and scrolling your mouse wheel up and down to switch between them. Tip 3. If you've ever played Warframe, then you'll know what I'm talking about here. But when you're sprinting, if you hold C, you can do a slide. Just so long as you're not going uphill, then you won't be able to. But this allows you to slide under conveyor belts, which makes it really useful for moving around a cramped factory. But if you hit jump while sliding, it does a kind of super jump, which is not only higher than you can normally jump, but it will also move you faster than you can sprint too. So if you hold the sprint key, press and hold C, and hit spacebar, and then hit spacebar again just as you land, you can actually cover distances much faster this way. It's about as fast as sprinting with Blade Runners equipped. And speaking of Blade Runners, this gets us into tip 4. When you've researched Blade Runners, jetpacks and things like the Xenobasher, it's always a good idea to keep a few of each in the storage container in the hub. That way, if you die when you're out exploring, you'll always have some gear to help you get back to your death crate quickly, and you'll have the means to defend yourself if you've died in an area where there's a lot of enemies in it. And talking about exploring, this brings us to tip 5. When you're exploring around the map and you come up to somewhere that you're unable to reach, take a supply of materials with you so that you can build stackable conveyor poles once you've got them unlocked. They have a ladder on each side of them, so you'll be able to get to those hard to reach places, or just to scale that cliff that you haven't been able to find a way around yet. Just bear in mind it can be easy to fall off the other side of them, so be careful, especially when you're trying to climb down them. You can also use storage containers, which makes getting down them a bit easier, but they also cost you more to build, so you may end up using more of your inventory space with resources to help you get around if you go that way. Tip 6. For this tip, Coffee Stain are giving you a load of ways to manage your inventory. Have you ever wanted to pick up a container full of concrete to get started on your mega factory, but you've always hated dragging each stack individually? Well, worry no more. If you hold control and either drag or just single click, you can transfer all of that item, depending on how much space you have, from either a storage container to your inventory, or from your inventory to the storage container. It also works if you want to move all of that particular item into the bin. Just hold control and drag one of them over the bin and presto, all that item's gone. You can right click on a stack of a single item to split it in half, and then carry on going down in halves from there. But there has to be an easier way, right? I mean, what if I didn't want half of the stack in the first place? Well, you've guessed it, there is. Simply hold down the right hand mouse button and a window will pop up, and then all you have to do is drag the slider to get to where you want your split to be, and then click split, and it'll do it for you. Easy. Tip 7. when you're mining by hand, you have to hold down the E key to do it. And this gets really annoying if you have to mine a large amount. So a little trick is to hold down the E key to start mining, and then press the tab button to open up your inventory. Then let go of the E key. You'll find that you continue mining by hand the whole time that your inventory window is open. If you don't want your inventory window open though while you're doing that, just hit tab again and it'll close, and you'll continue to mine until you move your character. Tip 8. If you've researched the Awesome Sink, then it's a good idea to generate the tokens for the Awesome Shop passively. Now, to do this, all you need to do is just draw off items from production lines that you aren't using very often and drop them into the Awesome Sink. This is great because while you're busy getting on with your factory, you'll be generating the tokens that you need to buy some cool new items from the Awesome Shop that'll help give you a really different, clean, cool looking factory. And you'll have to wait less time to buy some items because you'll hopefully have generated a good amount of tokens while simply playing. Now tip 9 is more for the new player than the experienced player, but in the early game you'll find that you'll be spending quite a bit of time running around and scooping up wooden leaves to then spend ages crafting them into biomass for your biomass burners. This can get pretty annoying and not to mention really boring when you just want to focus on building what you want on your production lines. By unlocking coal power quickly, you can automate your power generation, which removes all of that. It just leaves you to be able to focus on the stuff that you want to do, whether it's exploring or building. For tip 10, we're going to cover snapping guides and using them when possible. Because when you want to build a clean and tidy production line, holding down the control key while placing machinery can really help a lot. It'll line up either the middle of the machines or their output with the corresponding input of the next machine, which will make life a lot easier. It's even more true when you're building on foundations, as they have a grid system that comes with them to make planning a production line even easier. As a bonus part of this, you can actually place foundations on top of mining nodes and you'll still be able to place the miner onto the node, which makes lining up your miner with your production line all the more easier. In talking about lining things up easier, for tip 11, while you can use the scroll wheel to rotate any building in the game, when you go to build a conveyor pole, you can left click once to place it and then use the scroll wheel to rotate it in 45-degree increments. You can then look up and down so you can adjust the height of the conveyor pole too before you click to build it. This is true for the pipeline supports as well, but in that case you need to rotate it before you left click for the first time, because when you use the scroll wheel at that point, that adjusts the angle of the support. And you can also increase the height at the same time, but changing the angle of the pipeline support, it really helps in lining things up for your pipelines because they can get very complicated. And this runs us nicely into tip 12, which is the rule of 2. When you build a conveyor, yes, you can simply rotate the conveyor pole prior to building your whole conveyor or pipeline. If you put the hologram of what you're building in line with where you want the belt to go, so you get the green guideline, move 2 steps back from that, then place it. When you add the rest of the belt or the pipeline, it'll make a really nice clean 90-degree bend, which is great if you want to get those belts and pipes looking super clean. Tip 13. There's different ways that you can route pipes and hypertubes. Because when you're building with either the pipes or the hypertubes, if you tap the R key, it'll cycle through some of the different build styles. But if you hold down the R key, it'll open up a scroll wheel in the display like the ore scanner wheel, and you'll be able to see all of the modes at a glance and select the one you want from there. Just be wary with the vertical build mode. If you go from the lowest point to the highest point, it will build a pipe or hypertube in a different way from going from the highest point to the lowest point. Just have a play with it with the different styles and find out which one suits you and the circumstances you're building in. Tip 14. You don't have to demolish to upgrade. This has been a huge time saver for me. When you come to upgrade a conveyor belt, a conveyor lift, a power pole, or a miner, you don't have to demolish what you've already built to upgrade it to a newer or faster tier. All you need to do is select the new tier that you want it to be from either your hotbar or build menu, and then hover your crosshair over it and it'll become highlighted. When it's highlighted, just left click like you do to build something and it'll upgrade so long as you have the resources in your inventory. This is a far easier, far faster way to get those production lines upgraded. It really does save you a lot of time. Tip 15. If you plan to either split items to feed into a production line or merge multiple lines together, you don't have to place your splitters and mergers and then connect them with belts. You can simply plan out your belt runs first and then snap the splitter or merger onto it by selecting your splitter or merger to build and then moving the crosshair to hover directly over your belt. You'll notice that the splitter or the merger will lock onto the belt and then slide along it as you move your camera. All you have to do is get it where you want it to be and then just click to place it like normal. The benefit of this as well is if you choose to remove that splitter or merger from the line, you can demolish that and the conveyor will self-heal itself essentially, so you don't have to patch the gap that introduces to keep your line going. Another handy time saver is tip 16, and this is when you're building your production lines and when you're either in build mode or in demolish mode. If you hover your crosshair over the next item or machine that you want to build next and click your scroll wheel, it will change what you had equipped already to build and switch it automatically to what you've just clicked on. This works wonders if the items that you're trying to build are on different hotbars, but they're nearby in your factory. Tip 17. When you're first introduced to the demolish mode, it's only really obvious that you can delete one item at a time. This makes rebuilding a factory incredibly time consuming and not very enjoyable to say the least. But there is an easier way. By holding control and using your crosshair to move across everything that you want to demolish, it will allow you to select up to 50 items in total. You can also tap the control key when highlighting something to add it to the list of things that you want to be demolished as well. Although there isn't a way at present to deselect something if you make a mistake. You'll either just have to replace the accidentally selected item, or start selecting everything again from scratch by toggling your demolish mode off and on again with the F key. This is also a really handy way of counting items if you're like me and keep losing count. Tip 18 is once you've unlocked overclocking, you've probably discovered these slugs that are lying around that you've been picking up if you've been exploring. Now's the time that you can put them to good use. They allow you to create power shards which you can add to the machines to boost their output, but this comes at the cost of exponentially more power consumption. A handy tip though for when you are setting an overclock is you can set it using the slider, which is the first thing that's obvious, but what most people don't realise is that you can select either the percentage or the output rate and then type in what number you want it to go to. If it's higher than the number of power shards in the machine, it'll only go as high as the current maximum that the number of power shards in the machine allow it to do. To boost it higher, you just add more power shards until the percentage is beyond 250%, then you won't be able to do that. This is especially handy when you need something like 10.5 of a machine to create a production line. In this case, you just build 10 machines and you overclock one of them by 50%. That'll give you the equivalent of 10.5 output that you need. Tip 19 is one of the most important tips from a production standpoint. If you want to increase production of a specific node, then you can always go and find another node to put a miner on, but that isn't always a practical solution. There's only so many nodes in the world. Usually the best solution is to overclock the miner that you're using, especially as there are only so many nodes, as said, for each type of resource in the world. Bear in mind though, you can only overclock Mark III miners up to 780 items per minute on a pure node because they're limited by the Mark V conveyor belts. Yes, this causes them to have huge power consumption, but it's well worth it for the increased output they generate. When you think they can generate 780 items per minute versus 480 items per minute with no overclocking on the same miner. And that finally brings us to tip 20. Once you have overclocking unlocked, you've already noticed that you can increase the machine's production by adding power shards. But if you're not using the full output of the machine for whatever reason, you can actually underclock it too. This means that you can set the machine to run slower than it normally does, and in doing so, you can save power while still producing the items that you need. A good example of that is if you have a Mark I miner on a pure node, it'll produce 120 ore per minute, but you've only got Mark I belts, so that only allows you to transport 60 items per minute. So you could underclock the miner to 60 items per minute so it matches the belt speed, and it doesn't use any extra power to do so, it'll save it. So what this allows you to do is, with all the machines that you underclock to get the items that you want, you're just saving energy or removing the waste energy from everything, is you could use that energy, especially when you're very power limited, you can use that to build other production lines and get even more items for the same amount of power that you would have been generating in the first place. And that's my top 20 tips that I use in all my playthroughs in Satisfactory. I hope you found them all useful and maybe learned a couple. If you did, please comment below which ones helped and why, and also if you know some other tips and tricks, please also comment below and pass them on so other people can get the use of them as well. And as always, please like the video, consider subscribing, hit the bell notification so that way you're kept up to date with videos. And with that, I hope you all take care. See you in the next video.